My pip-buck jabbed uncomfortably into my side as I stirred awake, reflexively making me attempt to roll over and pull the heavy blanket further over myself. I was surprised to not only still feel the jabbing sensation, but found myself thrown off the edge of the bed by my own strength. I fell out head first, letting out a loud grunt as half my body flopped on the floor. As the pain in my side ebbed away, I writhed my rear hooves free from the twisted blankets and let out a long sigh. "Aye, you're finally awake. Had a bit of a close call with you." The gravelly and oddly accented voice of a stallion spoke up from next to me. He sounded almost like a pony from Trottingham, but it was a slightly different, rougher somehow. Mostly, I'm surprised I've never heard an accent like this before. I rubbed my eyes with my hooves, squinting to where the voice came from. "Let me be the first to tell you that if your friends hadn't flagged us down, you'd be nothing but a corpse by now." I stared up at my blurred vision, gazing at a bright yellow pony who sat in a quite large white chair, no more than a leg's length away from me. I felt myself get pushed off the bed completely, my flank slapping against the wooden floorboards quite painfully. "My friends?" I asked groggily, my stiff muscles painfully reminding me that I was still recovering. At least with the only copies of the Mirror Pond project safely embedded in my pip-buck, I could finally give my body a rest. My eyes refocused on the strange pony in front of me, his yellow outline reformed as a bright raincoat and hat, while the stranger in question was actually a unicorn ghoul. His charcoal black coat had a shallow crimson-colored cracks running across it. The only hair on his body I could see was a great, big, bushy gray beard. The one thing that really stood out about him, though, were his eyes. They were about the lightest shade of blue I'd ever seen on a pony. "Yes, sir. Your group is certainly an odd lot, what with the Griffin, Steel Ranger, and Ghost in tow, but they seem quite nice folk to me." He let out a wheezing laugh. "Well, I don't know, actually, but they didn't shoot me when they asked for my help. It's sad to say, it's a lot about a pony that they don't shoot ya or rob you blind." I felt myself slide back underneath the bed, almost as if being pulled by an invisible force. I dug my hooves into the wooden floorboards and scrambled to slide back out, getting up as I felt myself being pulled in the other direction. I tried to stop, but I slammed into the other side of the small room we were in, smack against the wall as the ghoul laughed. "Well now, looks like it's time for me to get back to the helm," he said as he got up off the toilet he had been sitting on, holding his hoof out and steadying me. It wasn't how he said it, but moreover what he said, that made my brain strain to put things together. His horn glowed faintly as his magic gripped the doorknob in the tiny room, the gears in my mind having just enough time to figure out where I was. A small room that had only a toilet placed was the only real chair. The constant rocking. And the only other time in my life I had heard someone use the word helm. His magic swung the door inward, the floodlights outside of the room confirming my fears. I felt like I had been bucked in the gut when he stepped out. The endless rolling of the ocean greeted me as he turned and trotted out of sight. The darkness of night, matched with the howling winds, drove the fear I felt deep inside to hook into me, taking root as my heart started to race. My stomach churned as I tried to keep myself steady, my throat trying to tell me what comes next. I threw myself towards the toilet, shoving my head into the foul-smelling bowl and heaving hard, spilling the remains of Brass's stew into it. I hate boats," I grumbled out between heaves, the low rumble of thunder filling the air. At least, staring into here, I could at least pretend that I was on dry land, or at least really windy and wobbly land. "Oh, you're awake." The soft voice of Willow came from behind me. I would have liked to see where she was poking through, but my stomach and the boat was making that a really bad idea. "I'll go tell the others. Unless you'd like to be left alone?" "Actually, I need to know something." I groaned as I was hit with another strong wave, sending the boat bob and rocking stronger. I heaved again, sending what I actually hoped was the last of the stew down the drain. Back on the riverbank, you looked at me as if you knew what was coming. Like you knew the megaspell was going off. Could you tell? Oh, well, I didn't really know. She sounded embarrassed as I heaved again, listening as best I could while my seasickness makes it extremely hard to concentrate. I just kind of felt it in my horn, you know? No, I don't. I used my hoof to wipe the sick from my muzzle. Earth pony and all. Oh, right. Sorry. Now she sounded ashamed. I was a unicorn before all this. I assumed she was looking herself over. The boat jolted and a wave washed across the deck as another burst of thunder shook the air. Maybe you should come down here with us. It looks like it's going to be pretty bad out. I heaved again. This time nothing came up, which was a good surprise. But it still hurt, though. Yes, I suppose I should just walk across the constantly tossing surface of this death trap to find a door. A door that I'll use to get further away from the life-giving air I'll need for when this hunk of junk sinks. I can stay up here with you, she said with a note of hope. Well, if you don't mind, that is. She paused for a moment. I don't think the others like it when I'm around. I'm sure that's not true. Hold on, I said as I turned my head, watching the door of the room swing freely as we rocked against the growing waves. I got to my hoof slowly, keeping my right foreleg wrapped around the lip of the toilet to steady myself. Another sharp jolt forced the ship to quickly slamming me back down, as yet more water rushed over the deck. The ice-cold water ran into the room, washing along the floor and my hooves before slipping back out over the railing. That was the only barrier between me and the merciless deep. The freezing water brought the fear of drowning bubbling back to the front of my mind, forcing my legs to act. I jumped over the door and slammed into the wall as I swung it, nearly closing it before another strong wave tilted us to the side. The heavy wooden door swung back as I tried to steady myself, the round copper handle catching me off guard as it slammed into my head. I yelped and kicked the door hard again, slamming it shut. I held my hoof to my right eyebrow, feeling that it was tender to the touch, but it wasn't bleeding. I trudged over to the bed and climbed into it once again, pressing myself into the corner as Willow watched me through the floor. She gave a small laugh as I pulled the blanket back over me. I'll tell the others you're all right, she said, before dripping down and out of sight. How she could be so calm about being able to pass through things, I don't think I'll ever know. Well, thinking about it, I don't really want to ever know how that feels. I like touching things. Being able to touch things was kind of nice. She popped her head back up, a confused look on her face. Your friend Longbow wants to know how all of you ponies can get seasick. She scrunched her muzzle as she thought about it. Then your friend Barras started to laugh a lot. Is it some sort of inside joke or something? Tell Longbow it's because the waves are unpredictable. The ground isn't, I said, as the ship jolted again, slapping me against the wall roughly. And tell Brass that next time I take out the Marauder, he gets to ride where the trunk was. Willow dropped below the deck again, as the wooden floor creaked loudly, the wind now howling relentlessly outside. The gears in my head hadn't stopped spinning since I found out some random boat saved us. But it doesn't make any sense. Philadelphia didn't have a working port, and the fishing around here was lousy from the radiation. So, what are they doing in Deltamere? The loud boom of thunder shook the walls as the boat heaved and bobbed, the storm growing worse by the moment. Again, I'm sorry, Willow said softly as she rose up through the floor, her voice filled with regret as she sat down on it. About your mother. Well, it wasn't your fault, but that's something I'd rather not talk about right now. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I had been through enough turmoil in the last 48 hours, let alone the last 2 weeks. Actually, I have no idea how long I'd been out. How long have I been sleeping? Will seemed to be caught off guard by the question. Well, we were all pretty tired once we got on the boat, so we all slept for a while. I don't think it's been more than a few hours, but ever since I regained my memories, time's been hard for me to keep track of. But you still need to sleep? I asked slowly, not even sure if a normal alicorn would ever need to. Do you still need food or anything? No, I don't suppose I need much of anything anymore. She spoke with a sigh. But when I slept, I could see my old life. The ponies I knew from around that cruddy little town. My cruddy little house. She smiled, a sad smile. My cruddy little husband. She trembled softly and stifled a sniffle. You mean Ponyville? I asked slowly. I knew it was small and dilapidated, but cruddy wasn't the word I would have used. Well, maybe now after 42 ran through it. No, that's just where I grew up. She sighed softly. Then tell me. I patted the bed next to me, giving her a smile. If we're going to be stuck in this boat together for a while, I'd at least like to get to know you a bit. She looked hesitant, probably thinking of any reason not to. I wonder if she was always so shy before the goddess got to her, or if it's just a side effect of being locked away inside of her for years. Do you really want to know about me? I braced myself as the boat shuddered. A crash of thunder outside made my mane stand on end. I banged my head against the wall as we pressed on into the storm, getting startled as a plank popped out and dropped onto the bed next to me. Yes, actually. I'm sure the others feeling uncomfortable is just because they don't know you yet. Besides, talking is helping me to not feel so sick. I leaned over and looked outside the hole, smiling as I gazed upon a hidden bottle of apple-flavored wild Pegasus that was still 2/3 full. So, where does one go from Ponyville? Well, I went where I wanted, mostly, she said, as I hoofed the bottle from the wall, wrapping it in the blanket so it wouldn't roll away. Both my best friend and I, we wanted to go out and see the wasteland, find amazing treasures, get rich, then retire somewhere nice, like Tenpony. She sighed again, this time with happy nostalgia. I remember that feeling, I said before clamping my teeth around the cork and yanking it up with a satisfying pop. Young, dumb, irresponsible. I let the feelings of my teenage years soak back in. I mean, I still had them. But between gangs, manticores, Killing Joke, and the increasing amount of crazed faction ponies, real life had somewhat dulled the feeling down. But adventuring is expensive. What's your talent? It has to be something good to make enough money to live on with that style of life. I held the bottle in my hooves and lifted it, feeling as the liquid burned in my throat, making me feel warm and relaxed. Well, I don't really have a name for it, but I can see things underground? She said slowly. I could tell she was struggling to describe it. Can't any pony do that with a lantern or light spell? I asked, before taking another drink. Willow seemed to be relaxing more and more as we talked, and I was glad that she was opening up. There was no more room in my life for strangers, but with the company I've been keeping, new friends were always welcome. That's not what I mean, she said with a slow laugh. I mean, I can see things while they're still in the ground. Chests, bodies, bullets. Once I even found a stable. She rubbed her chin thoughtfully with her hoof. We never did find the entrance, though. They seem to hide them extremely well. You can see through the ground. I cocked an eyebrow at her as we hit another large wave. How does that work? If my dad were here, he would tell you the most unintelligible science talk you've ever heard. She laughed and smiled. All I know is that my horn would hum, and I could see everything under me. I took another drink of the sweet whiskey. The soft throbbing in my head hitting the wall over and over was slowly disappearing. It sounds like the perfect talent for an adventurous pony. Did you and your friend ever find anything big? Nah. The best thing we ever found were some old emergency shelters that were stocked with plenty of food and medical supplies. That brought us a few thousand caps in total, but it's hardly worth mentioning. She waved her hoof dismissively. Well, not compared to our business. We found lots of interesting things for other ponies. They would pay us exorbitant amounts to find the simplest things. You two had a business together. I smirked and thought of how well Sky and I worked together. Who was the boss? I brought the bottle up to my lips, taking a long pull from the now half-empty bottle. Who made the deals and chose the contracts? Definitely Mud. She could talk her way into or out of anything. Willow's expression brightened as she remembered her. She once sold a set of vertibucks to the Enclave using only a single, near-pristine rotor cuff we had found in a scrap heap as proof. They paid her 2,000 caps and thought they were getting a steal. I would never scam a customer like that, but I couldn't help but laugh at it. For the first time since she regained her memories, I heard Willow sounding like she was actually enjoying herself. She held up a hoof as she panted and tried to stop laughing. Best thing was, Mud was just a name she pulled out of her flank before the deal. So, for a good month, the Enclave was running around the wasteland into the middle of the rainy season, asking if any pony knew if they could find Mud. I doubled over, laughing, as suddenly my troubles from the last few days seemed nowhere in sight. Not even the rough waves and the booming thunder could get me down, which wasn't exactly true, as just then, a strong wave bashed into the ship and threw to the floor. I watched in horror as half the bottle flew through the air, slowing down as it started to glow bright white. I looked up to see Willow's horn shining brilliantly as she levitated the bottle to the bed, jamming it between the wall and the sheets. I didn't know your telekinesis still worked, I said, as I tried to get to my hooves, the alcohol making my coordination a bit off as it started to sink in. I'm really glad my mutation didn't keep me from getting drunk off sweet apple whiskey. Me either, she said in amazement. I hadn't been able to use it, or any spells, in this form until now, but I just reached up by reflex. Hold on. She huffed and glared at the bottle for a moment. Nope, I can't use it at all now. I shrugged and walked my way back towards the bed, being thrust towards it as the ship jerked and rolled back. I slammed my chest against it as I climbed onto it, grunting as I sat down. So, you two had a treasure-finding service, I said, as I hoofed the bottle back up, taking a long, long drink as she nodded. Where was it? I'd like to meet this silver-tongued mare sometime. Maybe see if I could win in a battle of negotiation. You know how it is. Talk business pony to business pony. She looked at me puzzled. No, I don't know, she said sternly, glaring at me for a moment, before a smile crept across her face. I see what you did there. Okay. I smiled and pointed my hoof at her. That was revenge for the whole unicorn comment earlier. I looked at the bottle as I raised it again, noticing that only a third of it was left. Well, we had set ourselves up in Futuria, Willow said with a slight amount of pride. Tiger Lily just fell in love with the architecture there. I spat out the mouthful of whiskey at the name, watching in slight sadness as the mist flooded through a surprised Willow. Tiger Lily! I nearly screamed. Your best friend is the dealer in the House of Tomorrow, owner of the Lost and Found. I watched as Willow smiled and nodded happily. Yes, then you know her. She leaned forward and I felt my jaw drop. Know her? That no good. Undermining, silver-tongued rogue has swindled me out of more caps in one go than the average trader makes in a month's time. I growled out, wedging the bottle back down. I can't believe your best friend is that evil, scheming mare that Skyland kept pushing me to date. I folded my hooves against my chest with a huff as Willow tried to stifle her laughter. Yeah. Laugh it up. Skyline and I made constant trips to Futuria. The whole settlement was founded in what used to be a pre-war showcase for the homes of tomorrow. The whole settlement didn't consist of more than 4 or 5 large homes, surrounded by sheet metal shacks, but it being smack in between Appaloosa and Baltimore made it a good hub for trade. The one place I made sure never to miss when I was there was Lost and Found, as Tiger Lily always knew some new, rare piece of pre-war arcanotech that she wanted to pawn off to me. I had even recently contracted her team to find something, although she had charged me far too much for what it was truly worth. But that spark battery controller was the last part that Marauder needed. I giggled as her laughter sunk in, infecting me with its unrelenting pleasantness. You know, I don't normally say this for mares older than me, but I do actually find her rather attractive. I nodded and grabbed the bottle again, drinking again as I brought her up in my mind. Her sandy-colored tan coat nearly matched her strawberry blonde hair. Her always determined look, gazing out from behind a pair of bright red, round-rimmed glasses. And don't even get me started on how she showed off her flank every time I was around. She's not old. She's only, 30... Willow gasped mid-sentence, and smiled as she looked up at me. Raising her hoof to point at me, making me look down. It looks like maybe you're the scheming mare you hate so much. Isn't so bad after all. As my face turned what was probably the color of a ripe tomato, not that I've ever seen one outside of pictures and books, I gasped and dragged the heavy covers over my stiff nethers. It's the alcohol, I swear! I yelped in embarrassment, pulling the near-empty bottle close. Celestia, why can't I get her out of my head now? I leaned back into my head against the wall several times, thumping it quite hard as the boat tilted and threw my head against it harder than I would have wanted, making me wince. Oh my, Willow gasped, clearly enjoying my torment. You know, she told me once that if she ever found a stallion as talented as her voice dropped into a sultry, teasing tone, that she would want to strap you down and put that silver tongue of yours to good work. The fact that I hadn't had a good rutting in a long time, that I could remember at least, along with the booze clouding my mind, made it so easy for the midges to form in my head. You're evil, I grunted out as I tried to fight the urge to clop myself in front of Willow. I found that the solution was easy. Keep my hooves and muzzle busy by drinking. I tilted it back and took a few quick gulps of the apple-flavored goodness. Trying to distract yourself by drinking? Willow waved her hoof slowly before pointing to the bottle. Well, that won't help much longer. The door of the room slammed open, startling Willow and causing me to scream like a little filly. The ghoul in the raincoat trudged in and closed the door with a slam, dripping heavy from the storm raging outside. He looked with a small frown down at the bottle in my hooves, before levitating off his rain gear with a sigh. Well, that sure did the trick. Mood killed. Now look what you went and did. You drank my bottle of old whiskey I was saving for when I got back with my ex-wife, he said as he levitated it from my grasp. Oh, a wave knocked, and I turned and gestured at the wall in an attempt to explain, all the while starting to feel horrible for effectively stealing his special whiskey. Spending so much time scavenging can make a pony forget what's not there sometimes. I'm sorry. I'll replace it when we get to the trading post. Willow and I just sat and watched as he lifted the bottle to his lips, drinking the rest of it without even the slightest hint of burn. A smile grew across his face as he laughed. I'm just joking with ya, he said as he tossed the empty bottle into the corner. That greedy bitch died in the war over a century ago. I'm glad she went up with everything else that she got in the divorce. You should have seen the look on our faces. He walked over to the toilet, levitating the top off and pulling out a half-empty bottle of scotch. The only crime in here is that you started without me.